record on this computer. That's the right button. Rebecca, tell us, give us your game. What do you got?
Awesome. Okay. Well, I stuck my hand up because it's actually very, very, very specific and very time sensitive and very scary for me because I'm not used to doing the thing that I'm about to pitch to you all. So first, I'm going to give some quick context for like a minute and a half. I'm from South Africa, which means that I love rugby. And I don't know if any of you follow rugby, but we just won the World Cup and we all feel really great about it. And that's been my weekend for the last 9 weeks. And been all wonderful, all the like, nation building pride stuff, which has been an interesting observation because I live in the US and I've lived in other places where the idea of patriotism isn't as palatable. And I've always had a weird kind of feeling of it, of like, oh, we're just kind of using things as a symbol. But I was recently home and the lights go off for like 8 hours a day and things actually really suck. And so coming from a very inherently messianic nation building culture, whenever things go well, we just kind of like, oh, that's our world. And now everyone's a bit depressed because the World Cup's over and we have nothing to look forward to. So that's the context. And I had an idea the other day where I thought, okay, well, what if we could take some of this collective energy, right, kind of believing in the power of big moments and channel that into some other places, right? So yes, we love the 15 men who we all worship as gods right now because they've won the World Cup for the fourth time in a row, or fourth time ever, second time in a row. What if we took that and started something of like a campaign, right? So the South African national team are called the Springboks. And what if it was a campaign to like find your local bok? And the idea being that heroes aren't just people who are on the national team, but like anyone can kind of be a Springbok. So celebrating people who kind of go the extra mile and have this spirit of sort of servant leadership and humility in your own community that perhaps don't really get recognized for it. So I say it's time sensitive because we were thinking, oh, we'll just make this a challenge for November. There's still enough going on social media that, we could try and make something go viral, and we know enough people that can help out with that. I say it's scary because I've always had a big, huge like paranoia about like doing things in public and getting behind things. And there's always this like monkey mind of like, oh, people think it's stupid and it's kind of cliche and it's a little bit mushy and it's like people are over it. And so I am in need of some like encouragement. Like I need to hear some affirmation that it's a good idea. And then I guess like any practical advice, like it's literally just something to do for fun. And I think in all the conversations, the one-on-one conversations that I was having today, we were talking about, how do you know what you know? And I think this is also a personal challenge for me to just like kind of lean into intuition and not overthink things so much and just like, just have fun with it, just roll with it and see where it goes. And, if it bombs, that's okay. But yeah, I think that's the best description of the challenge or opportunity that I'm facing right now.
Cool, thank you. Clarifying questions.
Do you have any idea how you want to channel this?
Yes, it's very specific actually. We want to start like a campaign, just ask all our friends to basically like use a specific hashtag. It would be find your local bok, or the game goes on. We've got a bunch of interesting things around messaging. And the ask is people go and find someone in their community that they nominate as their local bok. They say why. And we've got some clear descriptions. So it's not just anyone. It's like people who particularly show servant leadership and humility and perseverance. And a lot of the things that we symbolically put onto the sports team that I think a lot of everyday people have and perhaps don't get recognition for. So they'd share a video or a selfie or something, and that's it.
So can I just offer how much I love this idea and totally appreciate the galvanizing momentum. I am curious, is there a time box around the experiment, and who are your top allies of the friends and network you're tapping into?
Yeah, so it is time bound. It would just be for the month of November. We had the whole name of it is like the Bok Challenge. Challenging to like go viral with like recognizing people. And we thought, okay, if it goes well in November, we've got another one for December, which would kind of be like, you are the bok, or like, you know, you set yourself something, but it's really just dependent on it picking up. So it's just for 1 month. And in terms of like the people that could be supporting us with this, I think that's the nicest part, which is like, it's literally just our friends. We just like kind of, between my partner and I, we're like, well, all the people we know, some of them have higher followings than others, but like, if we got this group of, let's say, 40 people to do this, like, that should be enough. And I think also it reaches pretty diverse corners. I mean, South Africa is a very diverse country. So it was like, okay, can we get like both our friends in Cape Town and our friends in Joburg and our friends within these different sort of economic demographics as well to buy into this? So we feel pretty good about that. Yes, Simon.
Have you thought about what platform you're going to use?
Yeah, so the one we feel most comfortable with is Instagram, and I guess Facebook by default, even though we don't really use it anymore. The one we feel less comfortable with is TikTok, just because both my partner and I are like not on TikTok at all. But we have a few friends who are, and we've been told that like it's the algorithm's really good and we can reach people. So that would be a bit of a stretch, but I think it can be done.
Okay, and follow-up question. Is it just recognition for these people, or are you hoping that there can be some kind of a prize, or what
Yeah, so that second part is really dependent on how well it does. So we were kind of like, you know, what would be the number of mentions where we feel comfortable, say, approaching something like the Siya Kolisi Foundation. So Siya Kolisi is the captain of the Springboks, and he has a foundation. And there's a lot of kind of organizations like this in civil society in South Africa, where it's like, if we could get some threshold of sort of evidence, I don't think it'd be too much of a stretch to then say, you know, let's have some kind of prize. It could be monetary or whatever.
My question. Oh, yeah, please go.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm the host. I can wait.
Do you have friends and allies who are part of the rugby team or writ large organization? Or is there any potential to bump up against any IP, proprietary, blah, blah, blah?
That's a very good question. So we do have friends who have been former Springboks, part of the rugby team. So there's maybe a question. I'm going to write that down. We should probably do that first. We kind of anticipated it wouldn't be too much of an issue, just because if you look at how social media has galvanized around the whole Rugby World Cup, I mean, the number of like accounts that have hundreds of thousands in the followings, of like, it's at this point, it's kind of like a publicly used term. And maybe this is more of a commentary on the Springboks themselves, which is like, I don't think they need to have someone doing their brand managing a little bit more strategically. But given where the environment's currently at, I wouldn't foresee it being an issue, but we can definitely ask.
My question has the no. I know you already no. Go ahead, Philip, please.
No, you go ahead. I had my question already. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm trying to. It sounds like you got a plan, and I'm trying to figure out how we can help. So, what is it that we could offer that would really help pave the way for you forward?
I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's a tough one, because part of me wants to say, well, this is only something that like would appeal to South Africans who are also rugby fans. But maybe one way that you could help, I think, would be in also just like sort of critiquing some of the way that this is presented. So we did put together a one-pager yesterday, by which I literally mean I just like wrote a few paragraphs about what this is, because I anticipated probably needing to share the idea. And I think, you know, I will say one challenge or kind of like nuance that we foresee is we also don't want this to become like one of those like patronizing, you know, go find the guy who works at the petrol station and like have a selfie video with him. It's not quite that. It really is about like the way we've seen people talk about the Springbok team, and particularly in a country where like people talk about the lack of leadership, and to see a team that just genuinely are incredible people and like are humble, and it's like it's inspiring. And I think that a lot of times people need that kind of hope. That's kind of what we're going for. And so I think there's something, I think in terms of just practically how you could be helpful, it might be just giving your 2 cents on how you sort of manage that and how you convey and communicate that. A big part of this is like, it has to be dead simple. We have to have fun doing it, otherwise it's not going to happen. It has to just be like really, really easy. And I think what you could do is sort of put yourself in the shoes of someone that would do it and be like, would this appeal to me? And then maybe just give some comments on that.
Awesome.
So-
Are there any other burning issues that we need to get clarification on?
Could you elaborate a little on like maybe like a brief sketch of an avatar or a persona of the qualities of, say, the everyday citizen who embodies some of this, the Bach qualities?
Yeah, we like thought of what would be some personas. An example would be like, let's say there's some small business owner that you know locally that, you know, doesn't make a lot of money, but has kept people in employment through COVID or you know, through all the challenges that we've had, who is someone that is respected in the community, maybe also does a lot of community service of different kinds, but is very low-key about it. Like, they haven't done anything that would ever make them known by anyone, but there's someone that you know personally that you think, you're a leader and you're not a leader that really gets seen, and I want to appreciate you, something like that. I am also going to share a 1-pager. Well, it's actually 2 pages. Kind of explains it a little bit more. And I think the other part that I would just emphasize is this thing of like giving people a sense of agency. And I think this isn't just true for South Africa, but I have had so many conversations in the last few weeks. There's a lot of despair. And I think people forget that they can take ownership of their immediate environments. Obviously, there's a level of sort of coordinated action that has to happen on a lot of things, but something that often concerns me is when I sense that people's own individual sense of agency is somewhat diluted. And it's kind of like a reminder of like, that's always still available to us. And I think that has been something of that inspiring feeling. And you know, that is the power of sports as well, is that it gives people that energy and that hope. But I don't think it's not sufficient when it's like we just kind of idolize a group of people. It's like we can do a little bit more with it there.
Dan?
Yeah, sweet. Quick question. I was curious about you talking about celebrating local community leaders. In New Zealand, there's multiple existing programs like that. So the Kiwi Bank have like Kiwi of the Year, and every year they elect someone, and it's backed by the bank. But there's a couple of other programs that are more like leading up to that. So if you think about it as almost like a tournament where people get elected for local awards, and then of that pool across the country, then people get elected into like the top national awards. So and that feels weirdly like a sports knockout tournament.
Yeah.
So I think like there's something like, and so I'm curious, this is the question, the clarifying question is, are you aware or have you looked into, in South Africa, are there existing programs like that? And is that an opportunity or a threat?
That's a great question. I can't say I know any myself, and I just did a quick search, but I'll definitely ask around. What does tend to be more common would be like small business leaders or startups or like kind of things like that. I think that I definitely would want to find out about it. But to your question of would this be an opportunity or a threat, I think honestly it could be more an opportunity. I think I would see those more as aligned partners. I also think that the fact that it's just like a 1-month thing and we're sort of attaching it to this existing cultural symbolism and hype around the box somewhat makes it distinct enough that any existing platforms would be like, yeah, we want to get behind this as well. If it doesn't exist, I actually think that's a great idea. And please send me some links of any of these organizations, because you're so right. Like this idea of sort of gamifying and bringing in some of that sporting spirit is quite fun.
since we're already devilishly on the boundary between advice and clarifying questions, I'm going to invite you, Rebecca, to mute yourself, turn off your webcam, but importantly, listen while we spit raps about what we think about your situation. So, what comes to mind? We've heard the situation. We've got some ideas flowing. How might we imagine? What might we need? I mean, first, the obvious one is like, let's fucking go. Just do the goddamn thing for fuck's sake. Um, and yes, you can. Like, you've got an idea, just fucking roll with it. One point I would like to bring up from the very get go is like, start with your test. Like, as Dan has told me on multiple occasions, like, write your impact report, define your assumption, define the action that you're going to take to verify or validate that assumption. Keep track of whatever your success metrics are going to look like. What are you going to look at that's going to let you know if your test is successful or not? And importantly, this exercise that we in Liberating Structures called TRIZ, know what failure is going to look like before you start, so that you can both manage those risks, and that you can be aware, because if failure does rear its ugly head, like, recognize that you want to stop as quickly as possible in the face of that. So anybody else?
I definitely, yeah, I was thinking, I loved what Rebecca said about agency and sort of like the 15% approach, right? Make sure that, and so I'd like to probe on that, or I would encourage like sort of more definition around that. And it's only a month, so this is a sprint. Like, what week 1, 2, 3, 4, and how might we leverage something like generative AI to keep the lift light on her and her partner and the extended community? Maybe it is really fucking simple, like you said, Jeremy, like, get the test. What does failure look like? What is good enough maybe for this, right? Safe to try and good enough for a 1 month campaign, and just get her done. Like, in a week, basically by the end of next week, she needs to have 3 to 4 pieces of content that maybe would be more rapidly generated with generative AI or something like that. So just light lift, don't exhaust the wonderful creative energy here, so that they don't come back, or it doesn't go viral, or whatever. And yeah, and maybe it doesn't go viral at first, but just safe to try, quick experiment, get it out the door. What's good enough look like? What's MVP look like? And how would they empower? Maybe it is like editable templates, so that people with agency can very quickly access content, spread it, personalize it, whatever. So, sorry, done talking.
Yeah,
thank you for
that's great. I can follow that vibes very along the lines of where I was going. I think the key thing that I noticed is that if you're trying to create something that's like viral and you've got such a short window of time and you've got Xbox and etc., I think that the content you're creating is less the content that's actually going to be shared and more the framework for the content to be shared. So if you were Shopify and you were trying to encourage influencers to promote your business, you go and you create like a login area, and there's like key collateral and logos and brand guidelines, etc., etc. So it's all about building a framework that enables other people to activate. And so maybe you could take the same approach of like that the effort you're going to put in is not going to be in actual content production, but how to generate content. And so like if you're stepping into the AI stuff, it might be about sharing prompts. It could even start with like, get a group of friends who are interested in generative AI, form a working group, get a buddy to come and coach you, get a workshop booked in like as soon as possible, and get all those people through the workshop. And then suddenly you're activating them, and you could start building out more of a crowdsourcing, more of the movement rather than having to kind of spearhead it. Oh, and sorry, I'll say this as well. I think the other really interesting opportunity you have is to lean into maybe the gamification of it, of like actually track what your reach is, and say, if we get to like 10,000 impressions or likes or whatever, we're going to get a partner. Like, that's the threshold. And then you just have to like find someone that's actually going to do it. But like, one of the greatest campaigns or crowdsourcing things I ever saw was a Kickstarter, and every time they got to some threshold, there was just another threshold. And everyone was just constantly crowdsourcing around the next goal. So if you can just kind of articulate that first goal, then everyone can start like orientating on it and using the framework to kind of broadcast. And then it's just about articulating the next ones. And it becomes a big game. It's fun.
And I really love that bit about enablement, right? And so if I think about this from this framework of social media, so social media is like optics. So the enablement to me looks like templates, right? So not only templates for how I identify people, like the standard fucking BuzzFeed quiz of like who in my social network might be a Springbok, who's the person that does this, that like leads you through 3 questions to identify who the people that I might want to nominate are. And then once I have that, how do I like upload their fucking picture into this collage thing that has the look and feel of like, hey, you're really being recognized in a big fucking way. And how might I be able to think about the input of those things, and what are the people and places that would love to elevate people doing shit like that? And how might we be able to like create some surprise connection where you get a fucking free beer if you show up at WXYZ with your Springbok incentive design and shit like that. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think in terms of getting this to go viral, I think it needs to have a very, very consistent format. And I know she's already addressed this a little bit, but I think perhaps it's a little vague in terms of a 30-second video. I think maybe you can be a bit more prescriptive in terms of exactly how this goes about. And maybe that comes with examples. But I think that each and every one is going to have to follow quite a specific format for it to go viral and for people to be able to recognize, oh, this is one of those videos. This is one of those. This is one of the bot challenge videos. So it was very obvious with the ice bucket challenge, things like this. It needs to be to go viral. It has to be instantly recognizable as, oh, this is the bot challenge.
Yeah. Good point, Simon.
not only does it
Otherwise, you
have
kind
to
of
be,
get watered down.
not only does it have to be recognizable, it has to be short. The best thing that I ever saw in my life that had this kind of energy looking, striving thing was an ad of New York City. When somebody came, it could be anybody, said, "Hi, my name is Philip Clark, and I love New York." Just this was perfect. And it was all kinds of different people. Maybe in her case, in the case of Rebecca, she can add a little information like, "Hi, I'm Philip Clark. I'm an entrepreneur," or I'm a cook, and I love the Springboks, and that's it. And everybody participates it's a direct relationship between the Springboks themselves, the quality of the energy, and the person that becomes how do you say, on the same level. And anyway, this thing in New York City was the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. I love all that. Like, I just want to yes and it, because I think it's back to like kind of keep it clean and simple, like a tapestry of exactly that, right? Like the individual assets then become like this beautiful macro asset when it's done, where it's just three things: individual person, like you were saying, Philip, maybe the video, and like they're very clear about these are the 3 things we want people to do, like Simon was saying, very prescriptive. And then the beauty is it swells and becomes a macro asset. So
yeah, you can even have people that are not from South Africa. You could say, "Hey, my name is blah blah blah, and I love the Springboks." It can go. It can really sort of or I'm a swimmer. Or
I also wanted to. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you're using Instagram, is there perhaps some background music that you can use for each and every one that is consistent throughout? For a second, I was thinking maybe the guy who's nominating, the girl who's nominating, could wear a Springbok mask, but it's too complicated. But something that joins the dots together, you know.
I like Dan's comments too, not just about the threshold goals, but the kind of the social element, like yeah, maybe it's pop-ups or it's like you do meet at a pub and you get that you get that free beer, but then just some more of that organic harnessing, and it feels more like the camaraderie around sports.
Yeah, there's something there for me of blending something really simple, like what Philip was saying, with something like to complete the box challenge, you have to say that with someone else you don't know. Like something weird like that just blends in like a bit of a social interaction hack. That means that you can't just say it by yourself. You have to find a stranger and like buddy up and make a video.
Yeah.
Just really simple, but like this is like now we're trying to engineer a viral meme, so a viral thing, and I think that's not my forte.
Yeah.
I think maybe just stepping back, I think there's probably, it's there's probably two aspects of this, of like what is the kind of motivation that's driving people to do this, and what's the objective that's pulling them towards something. And I think maybe like what we're talking about here with the movement and keeping the message simple and what you record, that's like the intrinsic thing of like, or the I don't know if I'm articulating this right, but that's the thing that's very easy to do. But to kind of get people to try and coordinate on something, that becomes like more of the objective. So you've got the kind of act, and then you've got the objective as two different things. And I think if you could say like, if we can get 1 million impressions, we think we can get the box like to come, to come to a town near you. And New Zealand, they once did yeah, that's right. They were rolling out fiber internet across the country, and they had a competition where one town in the country got every house fibered before anyone else, and it was called like the Gigatown promotion or something. And it was just like basic, but like it was about trying to get social, like it was trying to get everyone in the country aware of the fiber rollout. So it was about trying to increase awareness. So, but then only like a few people win, so it becomes almost like a lottery as well. So I don't know, like maybe if you could get hold of one of the box to kind of say they'll visit a business, then you can kind of get into other things as well. Like, but the crowd has to kind of activate to kind of unlock it or something.
Yeah. Many hands make light work.
Well, that seemed like a good riff. So, Rebecca, why don't you come back in and tell us what you take away from this Spit and Raps?
Wow, I am so, so grateful. I feel like I've just had like one of those what's that show called, Shark Tank? But like with nice people who give really constructive feedback. That's what I feel like. I've been taking notes, and I am just incredibly grateful. Like I think these ideas are so good. And as much as I appreciate the like, fuck it, just do it, which is like, that's very much the spirit here. I also really appreciate some of the nuance, especially around the like incentive design. I think you're so right about just the clarity and this prescriptiveness of what the video is. And then I think, Jeremy, you also mentioned the like defining the success, defining the failure, because I think there is something important about like, this is taking energy, and it's like, yes, it's a lot of fun right now, but in 2 weeks it might not be, and I need to be very clear on what it is I'm willing to do and not willing to do. And then also, Aaron, to your point of like, be smart about it. There are tools out there, like whether it's generative AI or making perhaps like defining what that threshold of people would be that would want to maybe take templates of this and go create the content in their same way. So yeah, thank you. I'm very, very inspired, and I will keep you all posted.
Dope. One of the last things that I also apparently forgot to say is what's nice about when I think about this enablement and creating of assets, I can definitely create those in the month of November and then just leave them there. And if ever they become activated, like they become basically a commons, they're an available resource for people should the time ever be right, to either remix or, if people find it and go, this is the jam. So
Yeah.
Which is the spirit, that's the essence, right? is the commons. Yeah, I love it.
I've just had another brilliant idea that I don't know why I hadn't thought of this before.
Please.
Go make a system where people can donate like or sponsor a reward, and you use it to target old people that are not on social media. So basically, all of the people that have the wealth that you will struggle to activate, if you create this system where like they're like, oh well, I trust you, and I know your mum or I know your dad. I mean, my parents are from South Africa, and if I did this in Cape Town in the Jewish community, I would hit up like hundreds of
We've got that. We've got the
Bobbers
friend.
and Bobbers and Zadas, and they would all give me sponsoring a box T-shirt that I can give to a kid.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
So, because I think like there's a lot of money locked up in the older generations in South Africa. So if you can kind of create an interface or an API that they can interact with, which is probably more just like money really at the end of the day. But then at least
I mean, it's a one-page website with a PayPal.
Exactly.
It's not that hard.
Dope.
Cool.
Anybody else? Simon, you said you had something for us. You're on mute. Never gets old.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure I want to share it now. I've maybe changed my mind.
I've got one.
Fair enough. It's a hard act to follow. All right. What's up, Dan?
I've got one that's really focused on liberating structures. So one of my companies is had to go through a restructure in New Zealand, and it's been quite hard. We've had to let some people go, and it's pretty rough, and I don't know what's going to happen to the company. It's a software development consulting company, quite small, but one thing I'm sitting with is this kind of insight into how hard it is to build a team. Specifically, the difference between setting up a team, which is like a group of equals, like group of founders or a group of people in a movement, like Regens Unite or something like that, versus a more important traditional employment company. And one of the things I'm struggling with is I have very core values that are about flat hierarchy and self-management, and liberating structures is very close to kind of what matters to me and how I want to show up, and I want other people to show up like that. And I think I'm trying to understand like what's the best way to kind of take people from zero, like they've never heard of any of this stuff, to they like it or they're involved or something. And I think that this question has been asked before, and I think that the framing I had before, or the framing that was discussed, was when like, how do you get people interested when they're not interested? And I think that's not the framing I'm interested in anymore. I'm interested in like, what are the best liberating structures, and what's the sequence of them to kind of be with the outcomes that I'm interested in being self-management, active listening, like the kind of flat hierarchy, transparency. There's a whole bunch of things that I'm looking for now, and it's very hard to find people that you either have two ways of approaching. So you hire people that don't, and you have to kind of like level them up. And I think that the former is just not a big pool, and what I'm noticing is that it's not a very diverse pool. When you kind of are just focusing on people that already have these things, like at least in my communities, that means a lot of white people. But that's just the communities I'm in. Like that might be why, but at least I want to bring other people in, and I don't know if it's my lack of ability to translate some of these things into other people's cultural language backgrounds, and I'm just trying to understand like what is an approach using liberating structures, and maybe it's like a framework with echo cycles with different things along it. But I'm curious if other people have done stuff like this, what's the kind of best understanding we have. I don't necessarily want people to get passionate about this stuff, but I do need them to be functioning with it. And I suppose my belief is that once people start, they won't be able to stop. And I suppose that's more of a personal ideology that I have. And I think that's maybe the problem I'm running into, of like this feeling of like being an owner and subjecting people to my own ideology. But it's almost like if I'm not going to go and tell them that they're going to be flat, then we're going to be a hierarchy, which is a different form of ideology. So it's kind of like, well, there's going to be one or the other. Like, so maybe I get to choose the one that I like, at least. So that's kind of the question. It's pretty open-ended, and I think it allows people to kind of cherry pick liberating structures or ask questions about them, and which I think is a nice framing for a wise crowd.
Sorry,
Clarifying questions.
I didn't get the beginning of what you said, Dan. So you had a company, you still have it?
I've had a few companies, and I've just had one company that's kind of gone through a rough patch, and we've had to kind of restructure, which means letting go of some people. And that team was it never kind of got to the point where it was like really practicing self-management practices particularly well. It was just chaotic at best, and dysfunctional at worst. So I'm kind of interested in, and I think that's part of the issue, is that I and the other two that own it we wanted the company to be flat self-management. So the problem was that when we had people and we couldn't onboard them into that, it meant that we ended up falling into like messy hierarchies or unexplicit shadow structures or something like that. It wasn't, it was just messy, and then it just kind of devolves into poor processes and just bad management.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many are you?
That was 6 people, 7, 6, 7, 7.
And today?
3.
3 people.
Yeah, but we're the 3 that own it. So this is the difference.
So you want, okay, so you in fact, you have no employees at all.
No, not now.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you want to hire.
I'm thinking that we'll hire again, like in a year, and I'm trying to understand, like in that situation, I've got another company that might be in the same boat of like hiring, and trying to understand if I cannot develop a onboarding framework for self-management and liberating structures, or then I'm going to be limited to employing people that already have those skill sets.
Thank you.
Dan, are you are you also thinking about governance structures? Because for me, liberating structures are tools that can be used to help organize and run meetings and come up with ideas and work together. Yes. But in terms of the governance structures, I'm not sure that liberating structures is the solution you're looking for. So you're looking for other governance structures.
I understand the question. No, we won't be going down the cooperative kind of or any form of that for these companies. I think I had a cooperative 10 years ago, and I won't be doing that again anytime soon. So that's not really on the cards. I think though we would still want to use it, some sort of like process, and maybe it's a recurring process every year that is maybe using a liberating structure to help staff engage with the business plan and help staff engage with kind of the financial situation of the business. And so there still might be some governance processes that everyone gets to participate in, but it won't be a governance structure, if that makes sense. Maybe I didn't understand the question.
No, I think you understood it fine. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. I'm talking about decision making and how people are going to work together. So liberating structures don't necessarily are there for a decision making protocol. And I'm thinking of things like potentially sociocracy, holocracy, things like this, aside from a hierarchy. So if hierarchy is one thing, are you open to other alternatives? And is that what you're asking?
Absolutely open to alternatives. I think that Yeah, I think that's a good point. Liberating structures is not so much the structure, like it might be something like holacracy or sociocracy that will be better at that. I think the way I see it though is I'm seeing it as it's harder to introduce people to things like that than it is to introduce people to like liberating structures as something that they can do in a meeting and it's over. Like you can kind of introduce people to the practice rather than having to kind of get them on board with the theory and the nouns and the vocabulary and all this stuff. Like it's just like focus on doing. I think that's kind of the interest I have because I feel like we focused on structure stuff before and that was the cooperative and I think it was a dead end. And I think the just focusing on the practices and the everyday rhythms and the weekly rhythms and the monthly rhythms and how we cherry pick out the good stuff from liberating structures and anything else into that and just build up that kind of cultural momentum inside of the organization. I think that's kind of the theory or the question I have is like, is that a thing? Can I onboard people into that? Is that something that people have seen work? Like, I think that maybe the point I'm trying to get at is my hypothesis is that if I can get everyone just like behaving like this, like with all these different meetings and different formats, that you can't help but fall into kind of a self-management practice. And then the question of how you structure yourself can kind of just be answered by the doing. Like you can just have a series of calls and discussions and make it happen. But like, does that make sense? Like just getting in, it feels so much easier to just focus on the doing, but I don't know where to start.
So Dan, I haven't been on these calls before, but
Okay.
This group right here is obviously pretty self-selecting. And it sounds like what you're saying is you're struggling to think of examples where, you know, it's this, how do you get the people who aren't interested to be interested and to be in the call? But you're in a privileged position because you have the group. If you could just go back into your memory, I'm curious, are there any moments that come to mind where you felt like you were practicing a liberating structure, whether you called it that at the time or not, and you were with someone that you would label as not interested? And are there any examples in your memory of like you having seen this be done really well? And could you maybe just speak to that a bit and why you don't feel like you can draw on those right now?
Yeah, great question. I think so I think I've seen most of my experience of liberating structures have been with larger groups. I think that's my first noticing is that um, these kinds of like the wise crowds doing it with 3 or 4 people, I think that's very new to me. Like breaking out into smaller groups is new. So I think I ran a workshop at a retreat a year ago, and it was essentially wise crowds. I didn't know what wise crowds was at the time, but I called it like hack your career, and it was basically getting a consult on your career. And the idea was that you just talk for 5 minutes, and then people ask you lots of questions, and people scribble stuff on big bits of paper on a table. And I think the nice why that worked was partly, yeah, I think, okay, sorry, I'm getting there. Most of the good examples I can think of are not with people inside of a small organization. It's with people that you build relationships and trust up with that you're meeting like once every 3, 6, or 12 months. And so you've got these relationships that span years, but you've only met them like I've got friends that I've met like less than 10 times in 10 years in person. And those moments of catching up with those people provide so much insight and value. And that's where, because we have such precious time together, we tend to use liberating structures and other structures and things like it to use that time well. I think when I've had smaller in my companies, we've done things like check-ins and yeah, I just don't, yeah, I think it's very hard to kind of, we used to do in the cooperative, we had like lunch every week for 2 hours. One person talks, everyone shut up and don't say a word. We had like monthly away days where we would try to we would do different exercises, but it was pretty messy. And I think the net result I think I found was that you would find like a couple of things that you would do, and then you kind of would stop. And I think that that stopping is the problem, that like the people didn't keep on developing skills. So it was just more of a piecemeal approach, whereas I'm maybe looking for something more systematic. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. I don't know how well I've done with answering the question. I elaborated, I suppose.
We have got 15 minutes left. And so if we've got enough clarification, I would like to.
A last question, Jeremy. Dan, please be short in your answer. Is your team, is this company going to be very competitive in a field that is very competitive? Is it gonna be is it gonna be like rugby?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, so people want to win.
That's a question. But no, I don't know if people want to win. The company, yeah, so the company has to be competitive. The people maybe not. Oh, that's interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Dope. Well,
Yeah,
on
that's
that,
made me think.
keep that up. Mute yourself, turn off the webcam. I'm gonna go down a particular. We don't do this often, folks, but in this instance, there is such a specific answer that it sort of compels me to do this screen share thing
Oh,
and engage in some light presentation mode. So boom, Henry's meeting macro structures. So liberating structures were created by Keith McCandless and Henry Litmanovitz. They actually weren't created. They were just codified into a collection of these different tools, these patterns. Henry is the most, what I would say, practical of the two. Keith is a bit of a hippie and likes touchy-feely shit. Henry was a CEO or executive at Maersk, the shipping company. So extraordinarily practical dude. And he landed on this macro structures thing, which basically just said, hey, you have these different rhythms of meetings that you have to do in your company. So fucking use liberating structures for those rhythms of meetings, right? So basically what he prescribed is for your dailies, your very short but high frequency meetings, make use of things like what, so what, now what, so that you're moving up the ladder of inference. So, don't just come with me with what you want. What is it? What is it that you've observed? What do you see here and notice? Which leads you to what conclusions? And then ask me for what you want. Come with 1, 2, 4 all. Make use of that emergent property of gathering and engaging with everybody, and make use of what I need from you. Explicit asks of, hey, from you, I need this, and respond with either a yes, I can do that for you, no, I can't. Give them a squishy try if you have to, or let them know that their question or their request is not clear enough to actually answer. And then, of course, Troika Consulting, which is this guy down here on the left, and 15% Solutions. 15% Solutions, again, leaning into what can you do with no more time, resources, or authority. Next up, for your sort of weekly, your relatively infrequent structures, we get into what's more, what, so what, now what. Moving up that ladder of inference is extraordinarily important because that ensures coherence of thought. If we move through up a what, so what, now what, we can sort of finish a thought quickly, and then we can move on to the next thought. But if we get into this tug of war / dick measuring context of, I want to talk about this thing first, no, I want to talk about that thing first, then it's really hard to finish any individual thought. So move up the ladder and then move on to the next thing. Again, what I need from you, make use of open space technology to give people the agency or the opportunity to express their agency and self-organize around the topics, and wise crowds. So use this motherfucker. And again, at the larger frequency of your monthly, what can you lean into? And I think this is kind of what you're sort of touching on, open space technology again. Use your design storyboards and make use of the whole toolkit of liberating structures to think about, hey, if we've got an hour and a half or half a day to do something, how is it that we are coordinating those things? Create yourself a goddamn backlog and work through those challenges or issues, so on and so forth. And then, of course, when you think about your larger strategic context, make use of the eco cycle liberally, critical uncertainties, a bit of scenario planning, and make sure, for the love of God, that you clarify your purpose all the time and sharpen that bitch. Purpose to practice is also very good, especially for things like team charters and identifying like your minimum viable, this is what we're going to do. Generative relationships. So asking teams, this is like a micro team health check. So it just asks you 4 questions. How similar are we as a group? Do we have enough diversity, basically? Jesus, star FPM. How is it that we
Action is A is action.
Yes, A is action. What is T?
Hover over it, Jeremy. Hover over it.
Communication.
It's the generative relationships. It tells
Yeah,
you
it's the yeah, but I'm just at any rate, it just asks you 4 questions and then asks you to make a rating of 1 to 5 and how this is in your team. Once you've done that, you have created a small enough artifact to then discuss and ask the question, how are we fucking doing as a team? And then panarchy, creating an eco cycle and going up level of abstractions, and then blah blah blah. So these are sort of like a relatively well established and tried and true, like, hey, use these structures within the context of these sort of meeting rhythms and you should be good enough to go. So I'll drop this in the fucking chat so you nerds can check it out on your own time, and then I will cede the floor with anybody else. What are the patterns and structures or ways that we might bootstrap self-organization and self-management, more to the point, to in groups?
It's tough because now I wanted to ask specifically what kind of group they're doing, what kind of business, because I've not come across this framework before, but the one criticism that I have is just at face value is that this doesn't seem to me to sort of solve the issue of self-management, right? Like I can see why it might push people in that direction because, for example, on the daily things, it's very, very practical. There's things that need to be presented. There's questions that need to be asked, and that requires just like being explicit and taking responsibility and ownership for what you're doing. But there's also a part of me that's like, man, I've worked with like engineering teams that would just love this and take it on. But I've also worked with teams that are not engineers and like work in very different ways where like some of the, I want to say like assumptions about how we get work done and how we even like are accountable to ourselves aren't necessarily there. Unfortunately, I do not have the luxury of asking our client that question right now, but I would just sort of bear that in mind. I think this is super helpful, but there might still be some lingering questions around like how people show up.
Well, the idea of a liberating structure is basically it's called it's useful for relational coordination. Okay, that's the power of liberating structures and other complex oriented tools, right? So the idea is to go all the way. The way is to say, well, strategy is about relational coordination. It's not about objectives. It's not about how to get there a priori. It's like let's just work on relations and see how we can build an intricacy and coordinate these things. This is what you have to do if you want to do self-management. So maybe the idea is not to think in terms of self-management in terms of like a governing structure, but like a daily process or a monthly process or a quarterly process. And if you do that, and if you and you believe that this is, if you that you know, and I think Dan is on the good side of it, because that means it's participatory, right? It's like ontologically participatory. It has to be. So leadership is going to be reinvented. Making decision is going to be found into the intricacies of these different little structures that gives you opportunity to tackle this area of work or this area of work. It could be decision making, it can be sharing, asking for help, strategizing, whatever it is. So I think that the worry should not be too much of like saying, how do people show up? It's like, it doesn't matter. You show up and then we'll talk in a way. You're invited. The principles of liberating structures are what make everybody, how do you say, welcome, even if you don't really, if it's not your cup of tea. But you're taking into a dynamic which is relational and which is participatory and which is how do you say, nice, inviting, secure.
And
So
and to offer, so I think both of these things are definitely true, right? There is a relationality that we're building through interacting in these types of ways, right? One-on-ones, smaller groups, and shit like that. There is, however, this question that is that the liberating structures themselves don't necessarily address, which is, what do you do in the context of somebody who, what can you do to really help people that for whatever reason feel like they can't show up as themselves, right? And I think if I get what you're pointing at, Rebecca, that it feels a little bit more like, okay, great if we all feel awesome. Like if everybody feels like they can jump in, then here's a great here's a great dance move that everybody can get in on, right? The fucking electric slide. But if they're not playing your fucking music, right? How do you get the DJ to put on your record that really makes you want to sort of move and shake? And there's not a whole lot of answers in liberating structures per se. There are some structures that help out with that, like building really building the relationship, like heard, seen, respected. I love introducing heard, seen, respected to engineers because they lose it. The basic idea is tell a story about a time when you did not feel heard, seen, and respected. This is a very vulnerable space, and it invites you to just go for it and builds a lot of that relationality. There are structures like helping heuristics, which are basically just a set of instructions for, like, if you want to help somebody out, first focus on quiet presence, just listen to them. Then focus on guided discovery, kind of like we did here. Ask your clarifying questions that illuminate more about the situation. Then maybe you can you can use more loving provocation and sort of poke at the boundaries of where people might want to reevaluate. And then, focus on your sort of process mindfulness, really get into your yes and see if you can vibe your way through it. So there are some patterns that are better at that type, at what I might call the squishier stuff than others. There's one practitioner in particular I want to shout out and point people at. Nakia Winfield, if you're in the Liberating Structures Slack community, is probably the strongest advocate for diversity. And when it comes to liberating structures, I mean, let's keep it real. Both Keith and Henry are white dudes, so all of their practices have their biases sort of in them, regardless. I would also say that we're running out of time and I could have cooked dinner. So let me drag Dan back in here and see what he gets out of this. And then I can tell you guys to fuck off.
While you're doing that real quick, I wanted to also bring back the context that Dan is talking about being with two other co-founders and that haven't really employed people yet. And I would just encourage Dan that if this is a practice that they take on as all three of them, and that's a behavior that other people just have to get into by virtue of joining or the organization, and maybe there's some consensus there, obviously, I'd be optimistic, I think, about the kind of culture that can create, right? Like if he can get the other two on board, and that's just how things are done when they do their hiring, maybe he'll start to see some change. And I do agree, though, that maybe like some basic onboarding materials might be helpful as well.
Dan, tell us what you're taking away with you.
Hola, hello. That was super interesting. Yeah, it was interesting. The slide deck was great. Obviously, I think it kind of gives a framework with rhythms, which I think is one of the things I very much was looking for. So that's great. I think the I think your point there right at the end, Rebecca, was really on of like, yeah, I think there's something there about the fact that it's just three of us and we know each other really well. So it's just very easy to kind of not do liberating structures, if that makes sense. Like you know each other, you've known each other a very long time. You're actually very performant as a group in the kind of chaos of a three. And it's just very different running a group of three versus a group of seven. And I think that's possibly like one of the problems we had when we expanded was we didn't really have these kind of well-established rhythms in a kind of more rigid sense because we didn't really need them. We would just kind of chaotically work it out, and it would be very emergent with the three of us. But that didn't scale well, I think, was the lesson. And I think yeah, I think that was really interesting. I think I think that's probably my key takeaway. I think I think there's this thing around expectations at the time of employment. I think that's also quite interesting. I hadn't really thought about putting it in the job description, obviously not the contract, but like you could put something in there around expectation management. And it's something I did in the cooperative when we went from 5 people to 7. And I actually sat down with the 2 people that joined and I was like, we have a piece of legislation in the company that says shares have no value. They're non-redeemable, non-transferable preference shares. They're just control governance shares. And everyone had to like sign an agreement that they understood this. And so it was like some really hard expectation setting at the outset. I think that's also a really interesting thing I hadn't really thought about, of saying like, this is how the group is, or this is how it will be, or this is where we're going, and everyone has to be on board. Otherwise, jump in a different boat, I suppose. Yeah, I think that's probably my key takeaways. I'm aware of time.
Dope. Well, thank you, nerds, for joining us in this October 30th edition of the Wise Crowds Design Call. Next week, there will be a call at this time slot, but it will be a different call. It uses the same link. If you want to use this link, go for it. But that's going to be the Think Slow Dojo. So whereas this is quite practical, we're working on stuff. The Think Slow Dojo is much more reflective space. You can think of it like more like a group meditation. So that's the vibe. If that is the vibe, feel free to join. If that's not the vibe, we will be doing the next Wise Crowds call the week after that. So early November. Thanks everybody for your time, attention, and energy. We'll see you around.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.